Okay, in the next video we're going to simplify by dividing. Okay, we see 2 divided by the square root of 2. Now, we can't actually divide a whole number by a square root, and here's why. Because that would be the same as taking 2 divided by, and then the square root of 2 is 1.41421356, and it keeps on going. Okay, so we can't divide this number, this irrational number, into the whole number value of 2. Okay, it's impossible. It's the same as if you took 2 divided by pi. I mean, you'd have 2, and then pi would be 3.141592654, and it'd keep on going. So again, we can't divide those. Okay, this is an irrational number. You can't take a whole number divided by an irrational number. So what we essentially need to do is get that square root of 2 out of the denominator. Okay, and here's how that's done. There's one thing you need to be familiar with. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2, these are both square roots, so we can multiply those, and that's the square root of 4. But the square root of 4 is not irrational anymore. It equals 2. Okay, so basically the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. Now think about the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. Okay, it'd be the square root of 9, but that's not irrational. The square root of 9 is equal to 3 whole. The square root of 4 times the square root of 4 is going to be 4 whole, because that'd be the square root of 16, and that equals 4. So essentially what we need to do is multiply by an equivalent fraction. Okay, and that equivalent fraction needs to have the square root of 2 on the bottom, because I know that multiplying the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is equal to 2. Now, if we're multiplying the bottom by the square root of 2, we have to multiply the top also by the square root of 2, and here's why that needs to be done. So let's say 1/2. I'm going to pick a number. Let's say I choose just to multiply the 2 by 3 and leave the 1. Well, then that would stay 1, but then 2 times 3 is 6. Now, is 1/6 equal to what I started with, 1/2? No, they're not. Those are not equivalent fractions. But if I multiply the 2 by 3 and multiply the 1 also by 3, 1 times 3 then would become 3. 2 times 3 becomes 6. Is that equal to what you started with, 1/2? Yeah, 3/6 and 1/2 are equivalent fractions. I mean, if you get 3 out of 6 on a test, you got half of them right. 1 out of 2 on a test, you got half of them right. So that's why we need to multiply the same thing on top that we do on bottom. So you're going to put an equals. Now, 2 is a whole number, and this 2 is a square root. So you can't multiply them. You write 2 times the square root of 2. Now on bottom, the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2 whole. Okay, just like that. Now, one thing I want you to do before you do anything else is take the top and try to simplify it, if it's possible. Okay, so the square root of 2 is irrational. Put divided by. But the only thing 2 is going to be divisible by is 1. So that's already in simplest form. You can just circle it. Okay, so this isn't going to change. Okay, I'm not able to simplify it. Now the last thing I do is divide my whole numbers. 2 divided by 2 is 1 times the square root of 2. So it's 1 times the square root of 2. Okay, next one. Again, you can't, the square root on the bottom, that's irrational, so get rid of it right now. Don't try to simplify it, just get rid of it. So if I multiply by the square root of 3, it'll be 3. And I multiply the top by the same thing, the square root of 3. This fraction here should be equal to 1. You should have the same value on, you should be multiplying the top and the bottom by the same thing. Look at it, okay? Should have the same numerator and denominator when you multiply an existing fraction. So 4 times the square root of 3, we write that as 4 times the square root of 3, and then the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is just 3. Now, take that top and see if it'll simplify. Square root of 3 is irrational. It's not a perfect square. But the only thing 3 is going to be divisible by is 1. Okay, so really it just stays the same. So there's no need to change that. So I can divide my 4 by my 3. I don't want to see that. I don't want any decimals at all. Hit second PRB if you get a decimal. No decimals. I don't care if it ends or not. So that's going to be 1 1/3 times the square root of 3. Or when that happens and you get a decimal, you can also just leave it as a fraction. Okay, I'm good with either way. Okay, now this one's different. See here, the square root's just on bottom. Now the square root's over the whole fraction. Now when it's over the whole fraction, you're going to break it up. So you got the square root of 5 over the square root of 48. It's kind of like with multiplication. You can break it up into multiple square roots. Well, division's no different. Okay, so cross that out. Now the whole idea is to get the square root out of the bottom. I don't care if there's a square root on top. It's the bottom. You need the square root to go away. So the square root of 48 and then the square root of 48 here. Now the square root of 48 times the square root of 48 is just 48 whole. Now these, you don't keep that as multiplication. Now they're both square roots. See, in these first couple, there's a whole number and a square root, which you had to keep separate. Now you can multiply them together. So 5 times 48 is going to be 240. Now, this is why you need to take that square root and simplify it. Square root of 240. Okay, 240 is not a perfect square. It's irrational. So you put in the division sign, and you see what 240 could divide by. So 225, nope. 196, nope. 169, nope. 144, nope. 121, nope. 100, nope. 81, nope. 64, nope. Be patient. 49, nope. 36, nope. 25, nope. Okay, 16 and 15. So then I'm actually able to divide by something, a perfect square that's not 1. So then I go square root times square root. There's no whole number to bring down, so it's going to be 16 and 15. So the square root of 16 turns into 4. So this is 4 times the square root of 15. Now, since you're able to rewrite that, you put equals and you put 4 times the square root of 15 over 48. Now you can divide your whole numbers. No decimals though, okay? That's a decimal, I don't want it, I go second PRB, and that's 1/12. Yeah, it makes sense, because it's like reducing 4 over 48. They can both be reduced by a factor of 4. So divide by 4, 1. 48 divided by 4 is 12, so 1/12. And you put that times the square root of 15 on top when that happens. Okay, on top. Okay, next problem. Again, you have the square root over the entire fraction, so you break it up, so you got the square root of 4 over the square root of 52. Now, before I do anything else, 52 is irrational, and we got to get rid of that. Okay, so the square root of 52, the square root of 52. So we know the bottom just becomes 52 whole when I do that. Now, these are both square roots, so I multiply them. 4 times 52, 208. Now I simplify the top, okay? The square root of 208. 208 is an irrational square root, so you put in your division sign, you start dividing. Now if it divides only by 1, you're going to keep it the same. But if you can divide by a perfect square that's not 1, you're going to change that top. So 208 divided by 196, nope. 169, nope. 144, nope. 21, nope. 100, nope. 81, nope. 64, nope. 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 No, 16 and 13, I got it. Okay, so I rewrite that as a square root of 16. I divided by 16 and the result was 13. So we now have 4 times the square root of 13. So replace your square root 208 with 4 times the square root of 13 over the 52. Okay, now you can simplify the 4 over 52. Now dividing is going to give you a decimal. You don't want that. Hit second PRB, and it's 1/13. The reason why is because they're both able. The greatest common factor is 4. You could divide them both by 4. They're both divisible by 4. So 1 over 13. Then on top, you also need to include the times the square root of 13. That doesn't just go away. No, these do not cancel. That's a whole number. That's a square root. Okay, let's keep her rolling. Okay, 8 divided by the square root of 7. Okay, so multiply. Want to get the square root out of the bottom. Nothing else matters. On a division with square roots, square root can't be on bottom. I don't care if it's on top, but on bottom. Now we're back to not being able to multiply on top because that's a whole number, that's a square root. You can't take a whole number times a square root. 8 times the square root of 7, and then down here it just becomes 7 whole. Now can you simplify 8 times the square root of 7? Well, you can drop the 8 just in case the square root of 7 simplifies. 7 is irrational. Put the division sign in. But 7 is not divisible by 4. You get a decimal, so that leaves you with 1. Okay? So, it's going to stay the same. So it stays the same. Now we can divide the 8 by the 7. Okay? I don't want just a straight division when you get a decimal. Hit second PRB. 1 1/7 times the square root of 7. Okay? Or if you wanted to, you could just leave it 8 times the square root of 7 over 7. Or, reason why I'm writing or when you get a mixed number is because if you get a mixed number on the second PRB, you could just leave it as a fraction. Pick the one you like better. Okay, 9 divided by the square root of 10, so multiplication. Can't have that 10's an irrational square root. You can't divide, so you get the square root out of the bottom. Okay, top cannot be multiplied. A whole number and a square root. You just leave that as times. Square root of 10 times the square root of 10 is 10. Now, could you simplify 9 times the square root of 10? Well, you drop the 9 just in case. 10 is irrational. So you put in your division sign. Okay, is 10 divisible by 9? No. Is it divisible by 4? No. So that leaves you with 1, which means you can't simplify it. So just keep it the way it is. Now, 9 divided by 10. No decimals. If you get a decimal, I don't care if it ends second PRB that, and it's 9/10. So 9/10 is already a fraction in simplest form. Don't forget times the square root of 10. Okay, again, when the square root's over the whole fraction, you break it up. Square root of 3, square root of 5. So remember, the goal is to get rid of the square root in the denominator. Square root of 5, but then the top has to be multiplied by the same thing. The fraction stays equivalent as long as you're multiplying the top and the bottom by the same thing. And this is no different with square roots. But now we don't leave that as times on top because they're both square roots. So the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 15. And then the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is 5 whole. Okay? Now see if you can simplify your square root of 15. Well, it's irrational. So is 15 divisible by 9? Nope. By 4? Nope. So it takes me to 1. So that'll just stay the same. Okay. And this pretty much is already finished. Okay. If you want to put a 1 there, you can. But 1 divided by 5, we know is going to be a decimal. Okay. And then second PRB will just be 1/5. It will stay 1/5. So if you really need a number out there, you can put 1. Okay. So 1 square root of 15 over 5. Okay. Be 1/5, and then this times the square root of 15 with the 1. Okay, next one. Break that up. You don't want the square root to cover the whole fraction. Okay, you got to break it up to see what you're doing. So we can't have that square root in the denominator. The only time a square root could be in the denominator if it's not irrational. But 56 is irrational. So I don't try to divide. Right away I'm going to get rid of this. That's the first thing you should do. Because we know the square root of 56 times the square root of 56 is 56 whole. And we make a square root and we can multiply 7 and 56. Okay, 392. So let's see what we can do with this, our new square root of 392. So 392 is not a perfect square, it's irrational. So put in your division. So 392 divided by 361, no. 392 divided by 324, no. 289, nope. 256, nope. 225, nope. 196 is 2, so I got 1. Okay, so square root of 196 times 2. So the square root of 196 is equal to 14 whole. Okay, so 14 times the square root of 2. So replace that then, since you were able to simplify it, okay, with 14 times the square root of 2 over 56. Now see if you can simplify 14 over 56. What's decimal? So no, I don't care if it ends. I don't want to see that. I'm guessing it's going to reduce to 1/4 since 0.25 and 1/4 are the same thing. Second PRB, so yeah, 1/4. And then on top you still have the multiplication of the square root of 2. That sticks around.